Dolly sat at the table in the center of the studio, her signature hairstyle gleaming under the lights. Today, she aimed to reveal Robert De Niro as the man behind the actor's mask. Robert De Niro entered the studio with that effortless confidence that defined him. Taking a seat across from Dolly, he nodded. "Dolly, you look like the embodiment of America," he said, his words eliciting a light chuckle from the audience. The first minutes of the broadcast were measured. Dolly, with her natural warmth, steered the conversation, asking De Niro about his approach to acting. He responded with depth, explaining how improvisation allowed him to find truth in the moment. His voice, with a slight rasp, lent weight to his words. Dolly shared her own thoughts, recalling how her songs were born from personal experiences, becoming anthems for those seeking hope. "We both tell stories, Robert," she said. "You through your gaze, me through melody. But truth always comes first." But when the conversation touched on public image, the atmosphere shifted. De Niro's gaze, initially focused, began to wander. The cameras, broadcasting the podcast live, caught his eyes lingering on Dolly's cleavage, not fleetingly, but with unmistakable persistence. The moment was brief but striking. The technicians at the control booth froze. The director in the headset clenched his fists. The audience in the studio, which had just been applauding, fell silent, sensing the awkwardness. Social media erupted. The hashtag De Niro stare trended instantly, with comments exploding in outrage. "In 2025? Seriously?" some wrote. "Dolly deserves respect," others added. Dolly leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, her voice retaining its warmth but taking on a steely edge. "Robert, you seem distracted. My eyes are up here. Care to share what's caught your attention?" Her words, delivered with dignity but with a sharp undertone, pierced the studio. The audience held its breath. De Niro tried to deflect, his face flushing slightly. "Dolly, you know I'm an old actor. Sometimes my eyes wander. It's nothing, just your style. It draws attention," he said, attempting to reclaim his signature charisma. But his words rang hollow, and another glance downward only worsened the situation. The audience in the studio began to whisper, and the storm on social media intensified. Dolly didn't back down. She leaned forward, her gaze direct and unrelenting. "Robert, I've been in this industry for 50 years. I've written songs about love, about pain, about dignity. And you know what I've learned? Respect isn't just a word, it's a choice. So let's choose respect, shall we?" Her voice was calm, but each word hit like an arrow. The audience erupted in applause, feeling the power of her dignity. De Niro, sensing the pressure, tried to improvise. "You're right, Dolly, I'm just an old fool, you know? But my heart's always with respect." His smile was forced, his eyes searching for an escape. But Dolly didn't let him off. "The heart's good, Robert, but eyes speak louder. And right now, they're not speaking in your favor." Her words, though delivered with a faint smile, were sharp as a blade. Then Dolly's tone shifted. Her voice grew quieter but more piercing. "Robert, this podcast is about truth, and I want us to be honest. Do you know why I invited you here?" She paused, her eyes boring into him. "Because someone from your team sent me a letter. A letter saying you wanted to apologize for something from the past. So, shall we start there?" De Niro froze. His face, usually inscrutable, betrayed alarm. The audience gasped, and the cameras zoomed in on his eyes, which darted nervously. What was this letter? And what past was Dolly referring to? The studio fell silent, awaiting his response, while the world beyond braced for an explosion. De Niro, whose improvisational mastery usually saved him in critical moments, looked flustered. His fingers nervously gripped the edge of the table, and his eyes, despite efforts to focus on Dolly's face, once again slipped to her cleavage. It was a quick, almost involuntary movement, but it was the final straw. The cameras caught the moment, and social media erupted. De Niro's stare flooded the feeds with comments ranging from shock to anger. "This is too much," some wrote. "Dolly, give him a slap," others urged. Dolly felt the glance like a slap across the face. Her expression, which had retained traces of her signature warmth, flared with indignation. She leaned forward sharply, her eyes blazing, her voice, usually melodic, turning low and cutting like a whip. "Robert, are you serious? I'm sitting here bearing my soul to you and you can't even manage 5 minutes of acting like a man instead of a drooling boy?" Her words pierced the studio, making the audience gasp. The technicians at the control booth froze, and the director in the headset whispered, "Oh God, this is war." De Niro tried to deflect, his voice trembling with tension. "Dolly, I didn't mean to offend you. You know I respect you, your talent, your charity, everything you've done." But his words were drowned out when his gaze, as if betraying him, slipped downward again. This time, he quickly raised his eyes, but the damage was done. The audience in the studio buzzed, and angry posts multiplied on social media. "De Niro, you're embarrassing yourself." Dolly lost her patience. She stood abruptly from the table, her posture regal but her eyes burning with righteous fury. "Enough, Robert. I've been in this industry for 50 years, fighting off people like you since you were shooting your first scenes. I've written songs that gave people hope. I've built schools for children. I've stood up to everyone who tried to diminish me. And you stand here, in front of millions, daring to treat me like some exhibit?" Her voice, filled with pain and rage, thundered through the studio, sparking a wave of applause. Her charisma, usually unifying, was now a weapon, and she wielded it fearlessly. De Niro, feeling the ground slip from under him, tried to improvise. "Dolly, I admit, I screwed up. I'm old. Sometimes I don't control myself. But it's not about disrespect, believe me." His words sounded sincere, but his eyes, dipping briefly again, shattered any trust. The audience erupted in outraged murmurs, and Dolly clenched her fists, her face stern. "You don't control yourself?" she nearly shouted, her voice quivering with anger. "Robert, you're a legend. You know how to hold yourself on camera, how to play the toughest roles, but you can't keep your eyes where they belong? Don't you dare tell me about not controlling. It's a choice, and you're choosing to disgrace me, yourself, and everyone watching this podcast." Her words, sharp as a blade, sliced through the air. The audience exploded in applause, but the tension in the studio was almost unbearable. De Niro, his public image crumbling, leaned forward, his face hardening. "Dolly, I'm not perfect, but I'm not some monster. You mentioned a letter. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone from my team? I didn't ask anyone to write to you. Maybe you're mistaken?" His tone was defensive, almost accusatory, but a flicker of unease crossed his eyes. Dolly exhaled sharply, her anger unabated, but she forced herself to sit. Her gaze was unrelenting, like a judge's. "Mistaken? Robert, I'm not one to mix up facts. I received a letter saying you wanted to apologize for something from the past, and I gave you a chance by inviting you here. But instead, you've turned this into a circus. So tell me, what's this past? And why should I believe you don't know about that letter?" Her voice grew quieter, but each word carried the weight of stone. The cameras zoomed in on their faces. Dolly, whose dignity and anger shone, and De Niro, whose gaze wavered between confusion and indignation. The audience in the studio sat in tense silence, while social media buzzed with theories. What was behind the letter? What past connected these two legends? And could De Niro redeem himself when his own behavior only worsened the situation? The tension reached a boiling point, promising an explosion that would change everything. Dolly sat at the table, her posture straight, her eyes burning with unrelenting resolve. Her voice, though trembling with emotion, remained firm. "Robert, I gave you a chance to explain yourself. I asked about the letter, about the past, about respect, but you keep dodging, and your eyes, they say more than you think." She paused, her gaze piercing him like a beam. "You know I'm not one to back down. So tell the truth. What is this letter? And why did someone from your team ask me to give you this platform?" De Niro, whose charisma usually saved him, looked like a man cornered. His face, typically inscrutable, betrayed a mix of confusion and anxiety. His eyes, despite all efforts, briefly slipped to Dolly's cleavage again, and this time even he flinched at his own mistake. The audience in the studio buzzed, and Dolly clenched her fists, her anger flaring anew. "Robert, You're incorrigible, she exclaimed, her voice thundering like a storm. I'm standing here demanding truth and you still can't control yourself? You're not just shaming me, you're shaming yourself in front of the entire world. The studio erupted in applause, but it wasn't a joyful sound. It was support for her righteous anger. Social media was flooded with comments. Dolly is a queen. De Niro, you're done. The technicians at the control booth exchanged glances, and the director in the headset whispered, "This is a historic moment." But Dolly didn't stop. She leaned forward, her voice quieter but even more piercing. "I've fought in this industry for 50 years, Robert. I've written songs that gave people hope. I've built schools. I've helped those without a voice. And I won't let you or anyone else demean me on live air." De Niro, feeling his public image collapse, raised his hands as if surrendering. "Dolly, I admit I screwed up. My eyes. It's not what you think. I didn't mean to offend you. As for the letter, I swear, I don't know what you're talking about. Someone from my team? I didn't ask anyone to write to you. Maybe it's a prank. Someone trying to set us up." His voice was earnest, but a shadow of doubt in his eyes didn't escape Dolly. She raised an eyebrow, her anger giving way to cold suspicion. "Set us up? Robert, you think I'll believe this is just a coincidence? That someone sent me a letter in your name and you know nothing about it? I wasn't born yesterday." She pulled a sheet of paper from under the table, which she had been holding all along, and placed it before her. "It says here that you want to apologize for an incident that happened at a charity event in New York in 2005. Do you remember that night, Robert? Because I do." The studio fell silent. De Niro paled, his eyes widening. The audience gasped, and social media exploded with new theories. What happened in 2005? The cameras zoomed in on his face, catching every micro-expression. He opened his mouth, but the words stuck. "Dolly, I don't remember anything specific. A charity event? I've been to hundreds of them. If I did something, I'll apologize." His voice trembled, and his improvisational prowess, for which he was renowned, failed him this time. Dolly shook her head, her eyes full of disappointment. "Robert, I don't want your apologies now. I wanted the truth. That letter was your chance to say something real, but you chose otherwise, and your glances today only proved you haven't changed." She turned to the audience, her voice softer but still piercing. "This podcast was supposed to be about art, about legacy, about respect, but it seems someone forgot that respect isn't just words, it's actions." She paused, her gaze returning to De Niro. "I'm done, Robert, but this moment, it will stay with you, and with all of us." She leaned back in her chair, her face a mix of dignity and pain. The audience erupted in applause, but this time it was for Dolly, for her strength, for her truth. De Niro sat silently, his face pale, his eyes downcast. The cameras kept rolling, and the world beyond the studio buzzed with discussions. Social media was divided. Some condemned De Niro, others tried to defend him, but all agreed that Dolly Parton had shown what true dignity meant. The letter, the 2005 incident, the inappropriate glances, all became part of a story that would linger in headlines for a long time. But for Dolly, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a moment when she proved once again that her voice, not only in her songs but in her fight for respect, would endure forever.